Have you ever noticed how your past seems to show up in your business? For many entrepreneurs, including myself, the journey to building something successful isn't just about strategy or hustle, it's about the healing. Our past wounds often shape how we lead, make decisions, and even how we view ourselves in business. So, in today's episode, we're exploring what that looks like to build a business while we're navigating these complexities of healing from trauma. It's a journey, right? Of growth, challenges, and ultimately transformation. So let's unpack how we can turn our trauma into triumph in our journeys. Ever wonder what it really takes to build a business and a life that feels like yours? Welcome to That Big CEO Energy. I'm Callie, entrepreneur, operations whiz, and your go-to for the real, raw, and unfiltered side of business and life. Because let's be honest, entrepreneurship isn't just about strategy and success. It's about figuring out who you are in the messy middle, trying new things, well, just because you can, and creating a life that actually fits you. From solo deep dives to candid convos with powerhouse business owners, we're talking all about the highs and the lows and the "why did no one warn me about this?" moments that come while chasing big dreams. So let's get uncomfortable, embrace the chaos, and make it happen. Trauma. It's such a heavy word. It's a word that in many circumstances has a little t and a big T, right? Sometimes if you've been in any sort of mental health journey or you have people in your life that are taking that walk, there's little t and big T trauma. And little t trauma is sort of those things that just fall to the wayside. They don't really make a huge impact on your life. You can notice them, you can acknowledge that they are there, and then it just really doesn't have any weight to bear. Big T trauma. Things like death, things like losing a business, losing a house. Sometimes for kids, it's, sexual assaults or domestic assaults. Any type of heavy subject that you can think of would be classified as a big T trauma. And so why am I talking about this, right? Like, Callie, why are you starting an episode that is so glum? And the reality is that I've had this walk with sifting my trauma, and I call it sifting the trauma because if you've ever gone on a mental health journey, or if you've ever sat in a therapist's office, and maybe you haven't, maybe you haven't arrived there. I'm a big proponent that, if you tell me that you don't need therapy, you need therapy. Okay. Let's not go on denial train. But I call it sifting trauma because when we show up in therapy, we come with our colander of things, right? We show up with our box of lots of big T, small t trauma. And when we start working through all of these things and we start moving the box back and forth and create holes inside of the box, we have a colander. And the small things kind of sift out, right? Those are the easy things that we can quantify and work through. And those are the things that we can sort of justify. And maybe they've bothered us, but not that bad. And then we're left with the big stuff that sometimes doesn't have a hole to sift through. And we have to sit with it a little bit longer. We have to work to make the hole a little bit bigger so that eventually it falls out. And guess what? Sometimes those things never leave. Sometimes those rocks of trauma never leave us. And I would be remiss without saying that they don't ever leave. They just look different. They're shaped different. They show up in our lives differently. And we get really, really good at navigating life around them. And so, why does this matter? Why does it matter when we're talking about it in business? Why does it matter when we're talking about it ourselves? Because, hello, haven't you noticed? When your business is doing really good, you feel really good. When you feel really good, your business is doing really good. And same true is for the opposite. When you're not feeling your best, when you're working through the mud, when you feel like your life is hopeless, your business reflects that too. So I am here today to just wrap my arms around you in a big hug and give us some direction. I have shared a little bit of my mental health journey, and it's been quite an extensive one with lots of ebbs and flows. A few weeks ago, I'll link it in the show notes. I talked about my accident that I had in October where I fell off my horse, and that's going to be episode 122, so if you want to go listen to that, you can. But one of the things that came out of that for me is I struggled with my business. I struggled with my identity in my business. I struggled with the things that I wanted to have in my business, recognizing that there was a bottleneck. Most of it was me, and some of it was because I wasn't aligned with the right type of people. And little did I know that when I released, I found the things that were for me, which is incredible. And so there are entrepreneurs, and I definitely am one of those people where I'm driven by my past struggles. And when I say that, I want us to think about driven by our past struggles for right now in the positive context. I have another episode out there where I talk about my daughter and the single mom journey, and that definitely was a struggle, and my business is definitely fueled by that same passion and the same drive as when I was a single mom and had to hustle. So we can take our past struggles and we can use them for good. Now, the same is true, right? With utilizing our past struggles to hold us back, to let the intrusive thoughts win, to allow the enemy to infiltrate us with, you're not worth it. What makes you think that you can actually be successful? Look at all of those people and what they are doing. You can't do that, right? Some of us are there. Some of us are working through it, and it's an ebb and flow. And so this connection between trauma and entrepreneurship is a real one. Some start businesses out of necessity. Some start businesses because they have tried everything else. They are sick and tired of working for someone else, always finding themselves at a dead-end place and having to rely on someone else for their income. Some also start businesses out of necessity because maybe they're a mom who was in a super abusive relationship, and now maybe she was a stay-at-home mom and now she's moved out and she has to fight for every nickel and dime, and maybe she takes on that MLM, or maybe she comes up with a virtual assisting business, right? Because she has to. She has to provide for her kids. It is a non-negotiable. Or maybe it's the gentleman that got out of prison and nobody will hire him. He's done application after application. He's called every single place that he can think of. Fast food won't hire him, and he starts a lawn care business. out of necessity, right? So some of those necessity built businesses are built from trauma. And then there are others who, which I would compete to say that it's sort of also out of necessity in the same vein, just a different track. Others seek control, stability, or purpose, right? That is their necessity. They want to find out what it means to have something that they've built on their own back. They want to feel time freedom and they want to feel time freedom and money freedom, right? They want to be in control of their own day, even their own minute. And so that is also built out of necessity, but it's an intrinsic necessity to getting to a place in life where we feel like that's what we need, and that's okay. But this connection between trauma and entrepreneurship is such that no matter what it is, we have experiences that have got us here. We have negative experiences that fuel us from underneath, and we have positive experiences that keep us going. And so when we think about this survival mode or thriving mode, right? Necessity over get to, many business owners come from the background of survival. Many of us have found out what it's like to be laid off after laid off or fired after fired. And sometimes it's not even your own fault. But when we show up in our business today with a constant background of survival and we let that be the driving force every day, guess where it leads? Burnout. Raise your hand if you have ever felt or if you are feeling burnt out, right? Like, why do I keep working so dang hard for nothing? But here's the other thing. We have this hyper independence that comes with survival. And we also have trust issues, right? We struggle to delegate or maybe sometimes trust our team members. That's a real thing. That comes from trauma. That comes like feeling like you have to do everything yourself because you just can't trust someone else to do it. So when someone offers, what do we say? I got it, thanks though. I will definitely reach out if I need your help. You don't ever reach out. You don't. Come on. You don't. Because there's this fear of failure. And there's this fear of perfectionism. Right? We have high expectations rooted in our past experiences. So let me give you an example of how this shows up in my life. This is super fun. So when I was growing up, grades were an emphasis. Rightfully so, right? Grades were an emphasis. But they were an emphasis so much that if I did not get the expectation grades, then I would not be able to ride my horse, right? Just a quick like backstory. My mom and dad lived in town and my grandpa and grandma lived out in the country. And so my grandpa and grandma were actually the driving force of the entire reason why I have a horse. My Oma had horses her whole entire life. My mom had horses until she was in high school, so on and so on, right? So it's like a generational thing that we have. So with that, my mom had leverage, right? Like if I got bad grades, I didn't go see my horse. Same is true when I moved into competing with horses. that mindset was instilled in me, and I will be very honest and say that I was not a good jockey to my horse. I was not. Because a lot of the time, I would be disappointed in him and not disappointed in me. And so I know that horses are wonderful and they're very forgiving, and I know that he forgives me, but sometimes it's unshakable the way that I would get upset because I had high expectations of myself. If I did not place first, then it was nothing. I was nothing. Same true when I was on the equestrian team, same true with any sport that I played. If I was not the best, and if I did not win every single time, then what was life for? So I had this performance driven mechanism inside of me that gave me ample reason to always perform. And here's the sad reality of it is it was because I wanted to be noticed. I wanted to have attention because I was the youngest child and I felt forgotten. And I felt like nobody loved me. And then, trigger warning, I'll give you a minute to click off. This is going to be about essay. And then when the sexual assault started, it really felt like that was amped up. Like I was placing expectations on myself to prove to myself that I wasn't everything that my perpetrator would say about me, that I wasn't, um, everything that I thought I was at the end of the day. And so discovering this through therapy was eye-opening. I always knew that I had a competitive sort of like I guess I always thought that I wanted to I mean, I wanna make people happy, right? Like, the people that I love dearly, I want to make them happy because I just love to love people. Like, that is my nature. But when it was outside of my nature and more of being able to prove myself, especially when it came to working in corporate, that's when it really got bad of proving my worth that I was worth the next leg on the ladder, that I was worth the next promotion, that I was worth the next pay increase, right? It's always about performance. You have to perform in order to get the next best thing. And so I got really, really good in corporate at performing, at proving myself that I was the best at the best could be, even though I was a single mom. Like that was like, yes, I'm a single mom, but look at me. I don't have to let that stop me. And I didn't. And on one hand, that's really, really good. But on the other hand, it's really, really traumatic. And so what I began to do is overwork as this coping mechanism, right? It's this workaholism to avoid these emotions that would come up. And so especially when I had these people pleasing and no boundaries, I would say yes to everything and avoid conflict. I would struggle, especially at the beginning of my business, to charge what I'm actually worth. I sometimes, full disclosure, still struggle to say no. And so it becomes then this toxic environment that I'm living myself through. It becomes this everyday trauma that I'm like reliving. And so if you're feeling like you're in this cycle, I want you to know that you're not alone because we get really, really good at, right? Like, I'm not going to do that anymore. I know what I'm doing. I recognize that this is childhood behavior. And so we do really, really good for like the first few weeks. And then something happens and we're right back to square one. We're right back to like, oh, yeah, I can do that. And then we'll like read a book or listen to a podcast, or somebody will say something that's like, oh, yeah, I was supposed to like have boundaries. I was supposed to be doing the thing. And so imposter syndrome then starts to show up. Self-doubt starts to show up, right? It's almost like when my dad died and I had to come off bereavement way before I was even ready. And for those of you that are new here, or those of you that just need a little bit of remembering, my dad and I hadn't spoke for a number of years. And I never had met him. And so when I was 20, I'm trying to recall here. 10 years ago he was gone, so I would have been 30. So I met him when I was 28 for the first time ever in my life. That was the first and only time I had met him before he died. And I remember when I met him, I was so relieved that this hole that I had been carrying around for my whole entire life was finally going to be healed. Right? And then just over 2 years, he had a heart attack and died. And so I had all of these feelings from when I was a child, right? Feelings that I didn't even know I had. I was not in therapy at the time. I was in a marriage that was just functioning barely. And so I remember the first event that I had to go to after I came back from bereavement, which, mind you, this corporation that I worked for gave me 3 days, which, can we talk about bereavement leave for 1 second? Really? 3 days? Someone said, and they didn't know, "Hi, how are you? How is everything going?" And I said, "Oh, it's going pretty well, trying to keep the straight face on, not really trying to engage." And someone said something about what their weekend's plans were, and it was their dad's birthday, and I lost it. I lost it. And I don't think anybody in the history of me working at this company had ever seen me cry, had ever seen me show emotion. When I showed up to work, it was all business. If I needed to cry, which I did a lot, I would cry in my 7-minute drive there, and I would cry in my 7-minute drive home. And that's it. It was the worst job, you guys. It was awful. And so this really made me question. Like, I left that event early because I was so embarrassed. And I sat in the car and I remember saying to myself, what in the F are you doing? What are you doing? What is all of this for? Now I would ignore that and I would continue on going to another corporation and, climbing the ladder there and whatever it is. And I really didn't get the gravity of it all until I started operating my business. But it also started to show up when I first opened Cal & Co., when I first started doing this operations work. These wounds would show up. And I remember when I first started in business, I would have a very hard time showing emotion on calls. I didn't know these people, right? Like, we're all operating in cyberspace. I have no idea who they are. And now, as I get to know them, like, I can cry, I can talk about my personal life, like, I feel like I'm hanging out with my friends most of the time and working, doing amazing projects for them, which is fun. But it started to make me question, would I ever really be able to make my business me? Right? Do you ever feel like that? Like, do you ever, and I'm talking to the people that maybe you've just left corporate, or maybe you're thinking about this as I'm talking about it right now, in terms of like, do you ever just sit back and think like, do I show emotion in my business? Like with my clients? Do I let them see the humanality of it all? Or am I all business? And was I like that before I started this business? Some questions to think about, at least, right? Like, let's talk about it. I think there's some self-awareness that we can, and I have done with multitudes of therapy work. Again, chiming in for therapy, right? Maybe I should like work on getting sponsored by Better Health or something. I've never used them, but all the influencers are doing it. We'll see. We'll see how it goes out. But I'm just a sponsor for, like, I will shout therapy from the rooftops. But noticing patterns in how you show up. There are lots of things that happen in my life that now I can stop in the middle and think to myself, what is that? What is that coming up in me? But I couldn't do that without support, right? I couldn't do that without having some other person, i.e., a therapist. And if you don't have a therapist, maybe you have a really good friend that should have a therapy degree. Maybe you could, encourage them to do that. But you should have someone, right, that can help you through this transition. Because it's been really helpful for me to notice what's coming up in me when this happens. Is it from my childhood? Is it from something that has happened in corporate? Is it something that is brand new, right? A new emotion that I don't even know existed. Is it a big T trauma? Is it a little T trauma? Like, what is happening? But then once I'm able to notice what the pattern is, I'm able to identify what needs to have change. And then I'm able to sort of reframe what I'm thinking about myself in that moment and what the situation actually is. Does that make sense? Like, when we have mentors, therapists, strong community, when we have people that can help us work through these things, we're able to see more clearly and more often when things start to come up. And maybe you don't have the tools, right, to fix it. And I use air quotes when I say fix it, because we're not trying to fix anything, right? Like, we're not fixing anything. What we're doing is we are making margin and we are making space for new ways of thinking. You don't have to fix yourself. You're not broken. You're just different. You've just had a series of things in your life that show up, that have happened, and most of them probably are not your fault. I'm just going to say that for you. Most of them are probably not your fault. And so there's no fixing us. What there is finding us. We're finding who we are now. We are noticing patterns of what is happening so that we can find areas of improvement. There's no fixing. You don't have to be fixed. But there's power in noticing what those patterns are and understanding how it's impacting your life, and then making a change so that when it comes up again, you're like, oh, yes, I remember this. And I remember this is what my coping mechanism is, or this is what I vowed that I would do next when it came up again. But we can only do that if we're setting boundaries with ourselves, if we are setting boundaries with other people, if we're creating, ecosystems around us that are supportive, that help us mirror what it is that we need to see within ourselves with love and compassion. And then through that, I think it's when we show up in our business, we're able to then set boundaries in our business, and we're able to sort of automate some of the areas that we need to be able to release ourselves from, because it causes burnout, it causes stress, it causes unnecessary wanting in our life. And so, one of the things that I have just really made sure of, and I'm continuing to work through because it's always a process, is that I'm saying yes to myself. I'm asking myself every day, what does it mean for me to feel whole? That is my word for the year, by the way, in 2025 is wholeness. And I know I usually make a podcast about it and all the things, and listen, it's April. We're not doing that. But the word was wholeness. And I arrived at that because I'm really well-rounded in my mental health journey, that I've I've got all of the little stuff, and I've got all of the medium rocks, and maybe there's a one or two that are still like lingering in the box that rear its ugly head every now and again. And there's some like pebbles that seem to miss the holes that are in there that also come around. But most of the time, I'm able to notice what is going on. And so when I show up in this wholeness mindset of what are the areas of my life that make me feel whole? Well, I want my business to be thriving. I want my business to not be in survival mode. I want to feel really, really good about the people that are in my circle. I have the area of my marriage, which is so, you guys, I can't even tell you. Maybe I'll have him on the podcast soon. Again, the growth that we have had has been amazing. But one of the things that I've made a commitment to is to talk more, to be able to openly express what it is that I need, to be able to articulate that. And there's a piece of vulnerability that happens in relationships when you're able to expressly say what each other need. And sometimes it comes in the form of an audible discussion, right? But I remember hearing Brene Brown talk about her and her husband, Steve, where sometimes they will text or they will show up in a conversation and they'll say, I'm at 25% today. I need you to be the other 75%. And they know, right? Because they've had conversations on what that means. They know then what it takes for the other person to be the 75, because someone is feeling 25% or someone's feeling 5%, whatever that is. And so the other buckets of my wholeness are my faith journey. That is the number one, faith over everything. But my faith walk is huge. I want that to be the light of my life. I want to understand God more and who I am in him and let him lead my life more and be in complete submission to him. And then there's this writing piece of my life, which I've talked about briefly. And then there's the creative side of me that, wants to maybe play the clarinet again someday. So I have all of these pieces, including like my health journey. And, we all have different unique facets of each other. But when I look at this wholeness journey, it is really understanding how my trauma is showing up in it. So that when I'm then feeding out through my business and putting things out into the world and showing up with my clients, I'm able to reflect on how my past wounds are influencing my business, what I can do to make them softer, what I can do to shepherd them a little bit differently, but then also seek community and support for those things that I need to be able to heal at the same time and thrive inside of my business. Right? Like you can build a thriving business and heal at the same time. It's not easy. Nobody ever said that this life was going to be easy, but what it is it's available to you with communication, setting expectations, setting boundaries, both with yourself and the people that you work with. And, if you're a client-based business, if you have a team, all of those things, your family, boyfriends, girlfriends, parents, children, everybody. Like there's delegation and responsibility and boundaries that need to flow out from you to every piece that is sort of on your spoke wheel of wholeness. And then within that, it is being communicative about the types of support that you need. And you can only find that if you are searching within, if you are noticing what it is that is coming up in you, and you're finding words to be able to put to that. So I feel like this episode has really given me an enlightenment to understanding that, yes, we have trauma, but it doesn't have to be the driving force of our business. It can be the thing that we notice when we need extra support. And it can be the thing that does not impact all of the negativity that our business can build out from that. It can be a positive result of thriving inside of our business. And so my reflection back to you would be, what are you doing to notice what patterns are showing up in your business? What are you doing to understand what it is that you need, that you think, and that you feel? Are you seeking community support? Are you finding someone that you can talk to, whether it's a licensed professional or not, right? And then how are you navigating your past wounds and letting them influence your business? So those are the questions I have for you. Sit with them today, ponder on that, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey friend, thanks for hanging out with me today. If something in this episode clicked for you, I want you to shoot me a DM over on Instagram. The link is in the show notes. Let's chat about how you're making the messy middle work for you. If you loved what you heard, would you mind sharing this episode with a friend who needs to hear it too? And drop a quick review if you don't mind. It helps get the word out, and I appreciate it more than you know. Catch you in the next one.